All right, welcome back to another episode of the ConquerCast. I'm here with Bill Thompson today, the CEO and founder of Spartan Forge, out from Virginia. Visit us here at the MTN Ops headquarters. It sounds like you've been doing a little podcast tour here in Utah.
Yeah, the rigmarole, right? Like small business. So I'm trying to optimize while if I'm getting the plane ticket to town, like see as many friends and partners as I can while I'm here. And I'm happy to be here today. You guys have an awesome studio.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate you being here. It sounds like you've got a lot of friends out here in Utah.
A few, yeah. I made acquaintance a couple of years ago with Evan Hafer. We knew a lot of the same people coming from the military community, and he's been a great supporter of mine and helping me out and networking and people and advice. The most valuable part has just been his advice, having taken his company public and done the rigmarole when it comes to stuff we were just talking about, investment and people and business and stuff. So it's been great.
That's good. It's always good to have those connections. And I want to dive into that military background. I want to talk about Spartan Forge for the most part, and kind of your journey, what it's meant to you, what the product is doing for people right now. But let's dive in a little bit to your background into the military. What was did you always have the desire to serve our country? And thank you for doing so.
Thank you for your patriotism. I didn't. I will be honest, and I'd like to say I had this like noble, goal where I was going to go and serve the military, but really it was just where I grew up in North Dakota. You're either a farmer or you work in the support industry for farmers. And I came from a family where we didn't have much. My father died when I was young, single mother. And for me, it was a way to get out of North Dakota. Okay. Not that it's not a great state. I love that state. It's just I'm not a farmer. Okay. I'm not a restaurant owner. I'm not a banker. So when I saw the recruiter, I thought, this is my opportunity to get out of here. We didn't have the means for me to do it otherwise or go to college. And I just wanted to get out of that cycle of North Dakota. So I signed up when I was 17. And as soon as I graduated, I think it was less than a month, I was on an airplane to go to basic training and start my military career. So for me, it was the military is a great equalizer, and it's a very equitable organization in that if you're willing to go through the slog, right, like the first 5, 6, 7 months, and then just do what you're told, you can get to a very decent standard of living, and you can get to a very decent, predictable life, with the exception of things like deployments. September 11th happened while I was in basic training, but anybody can get in there, and Colin Powell, right? Like came from nowhere, I think North Carolina, and then he was a 4-star general. And that's the great thing about the American military, especially like other militaries where there's got to be nobility, or you got to be knowing someone, or there's a caste system like in India, like so you'll only be this. In the U.S. military, it's like for the first anybody who ever thinks about joining, like 4 years, it's just show up on time, pass your PT test, do what you're told. They'll tell you everything you got to do. If you can do that for 4 years, it's super easy. It's simple. The rubric is there. Like there's no mystery. But then if you want to graduate into like leadership and other stuff like I did while I was in there, of course, then you got to kind of set yourself apart. But again, the rubric is laid out for you. There's no mystery to it. So it's a great equalizer in that way, that it affords opportunity for anybody who's willing to just stick their nose.
Sounds like discipline is like the key to success in military. Is that one of those?
Yeah. Discipline for sure is the success, but also like, they do a good job when you join of like breaking everyone down to the same level. Okay. Everyone's got the same stupid haircut, the same uniform. You're getting treated the same way, which it's, the movies are, highlight it in one way, and there's some of that. It's more very early on, and then after that, it's just do what you're told. And then once you start getting the leadership position, as long as you're metabolizing everything that's put in front of you, you can recreate it and be a leader. And there's nothing remarkable about me except for there's nothing remarkable about me, and it allowed me to, I did 21 years, and some of the operations and things I was involved in, and the communities inside of the military that I got myself involved in, just provided me with like a growth curve that it would be impossible in any other form or factor for someone like me from where I was, growing up with my mom in a trailer in North Dakota. My mom, I probably made $10,000 a year, $15,000 a year, to being, a 42-year-old with 3 companies and, all of the opportunity, that I owe that all to the military and to the American experiment. Like there's no other way to put it.
Well, we all owe an attitude of gratitude and debt
for sure
to the military, because I mean, that's how I'm able to do. I never served in the military, but I'm able to operate a business and to have the opportunity to go out and do those things on my own. And it's because people have fought for those rights and abilities.
Yeah. And it really doesn't exist anywhere else. I've been all over the world, the Middle East, lived in Europe, lived in Africa, the Philippines, Asia, all over the place. Like, this doesn't exist anywhere else. I don't think people, it's a bug and a feature for our system, in that people don't really experience outside of the system. So they think the system is like this everywhere. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, it's not like this anywhere else. And we're truly blessed. Like, the Lord bless this country, and there's no question about it in my mind.
So what did that become for you? Did right out the gates, did you appreciate that and see that the Lord had blessed this country? And was that, or did that grow over time? Were there moments where it was like the pride and the just what you were doing, the fulfillment of that? When did that happen for you?
Yeah, I mean, like, growing up, like, you become more conscious of things. A lot, being young, especially young, and, like, in the States, you can, like I said, assume that the system's like this everywhere. And it was as I grew in the military and I started to see, like, hey, these people never had a choice in their government. They didn't have a choice who ran this place. They can say the wrong thing about their leader, and that's the story of them. So for me, it was, well, I guess and I apologize to the listeners, we'll keep this at an hour, but I almost never have a short answer, because I try to talk about meaningful things, and meaningful things don't deserve like 1 or 2 sentences.
Yeah, I agree.
They deserve to be fleshed out. So even if we answer 2 or 3 good questions, for me, it was, I didn't really understand. I did my first couple tours in Iraq, and I had like the rah sisumba, like, we've been attacked, all things in, like, got to defend the American experiment. And I never really pulled the thread, and I don't think anybody did for like 3 or 4 years. I'm like, what are we doing in Iraq, though? We were attacked by these people who are in Afghanistan, or actually went through Saudi Arabia, and there's a nexus with the Taliban. But what does this have to do with Iraq and the Iraqi army and Saddam Hussein? I didn't really start to peel that question until my 3rd tour. And then during that tour, I was convinced that what happened on my 2nd tour was my son was born, and I missed my son being born. That really kind of, that was hard for me. And then when I got told I was getting mobilized again, I was like, man, as soon as this tour is up, like, I'm done. Like, there's no question I'm getting out of the military. And being in Iraq, you have a lot of time in between operations. It's like this, it's like sitting, in a Tabata or something, and nothing's going on. Then you hear the bell ring, and all of a sudden you're going nuts for 30 seconds, and then it's a minute of nothing. And then that's how the military is. Like, you sit around, nothing is happening. You're working out, you're going to the chow hall, you're screwing around, shooting your gun, whatever. And then, hey, there's an op Saturday. And then everything goes nuts for 36 hours, and then 3 more weeks of waiting around for something to happen. So I had a lot of time to sit around. So I have a bit of an addictive personality. And it was on that tour where I decided I'm going to use my free time, where really my time is my own, to dive into the American experiment and understand why, like, if I'm going to leave the military, what did I do while I was here? Because I didn't do any Afghanistan deployments till later in my career. It was all Iraqi focused. And I said, if I'm going to stay in, or in this case, if I'm going to get out, like, what did I do here? Like, was this a waste of 6 years, 7 years? Like, did I just sit here for this war so KBR could make a bunch of money by rebuilding Iraq, and these defense contractors could make a bunch of money by blowing up munitions? What am I doing? So I did this research, and I have an addictive personality, like I said. So I went to reading, like, first, the Constitution is the obvious place to start. And then what informed the Constitution. So, like, what went into this? So, like, Montesquieu or John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, the Federalist Papers, what did the founders recognize about the human condition, and what parts of that did they try to encapsulate into our founding documents to allow that to thrive in a way that hasn't been done before, or certainly hadn't been getting done under them when they were part of England, or what was happening in France during the French Revolution at that time, and how that was informing what they were writing, whether it was the Federalist Papers or Franklin with his articles that he wrote, or Thomas Jefferson, or guys like John Jay, an author of the Federalist Papers. They spell out in meticulous nature what it was that they were trying to do. And it's really astounding when you think about it, because all these guys were like, I think Jefferson was like 18 or 19 or something when he first started writing.
Wow.
And like 18 or 19, I was not thinking about anything at that point. But I guess because nature was much more a part of their life, they had to understand things at an earlier age and have families and stuff at an earlier age, which I think would be a good thing if we started doing now again. Yeah. But they had to do that stuff. It was thrust on them.
Yeah.
So
they probably weren't as distracted as we are with so much,
right? For sure. And so that reading, I gained a new appreciation, not that we lived in a perfect system, but it was the most perfect system. And that we had the upwards mobility, and there was still a Bill of Rights, and there was still a Constitution. And even if it wasn't being followed, there were metrics and checks and balances and ways to measure what was happening, and that the system could autocorrect and get better. And that as I interacted with people in other places in the world, it was evident to me that that it was a gift. And so I decided on a deployment to stay in the military. And 21 years later I retired. So, that was kind of the coming of age for me in that regard. So it was definitely later for me. My first few years, I was kind of unconscious to what I was a part of, what I was doing, where I was going while I was here. It was more or less just, this is my job.
Wow.
And then when, you do a couple of tours and there are people dying and things, and it's like, what is happening? So, and thankfully, my addictive personality really allowed me to get to the core of this and exactly what they were trying to do. So I have a great appreciation for it.
Oh, that's awesome. Are others in the military, a lot of them like you that way, or did you educate people along the way as to what you were learning and mentor them so that they could kind of have the same perspective on things? Or
I think a lot of people still, I would say, the military is a cross section of society. So I would say it was a similar amount of people. Obviously, the more you stay in or the longer you stay in, there has to be a reason other than, I want to retire in 25 years. Like, that's not going to cut muster whenever it comes to why someone would stay in. So maybe in the higher ranks, people start to get more of an appreciation and stuff. Not saying that someone couldn't at the lower ranks, but you're a kid, you're 18, you're just doing whatever your grandfather or father told you or whomever. Yeah. But there's still a really interesting... It's an interesting cross-section in society that you still have crazy people, like people with really crazy views, people with really not crazy views in the military. But by and large, I would say as you move up the rank structure, people have more of an appreciation for what we are doing. When I learned that, then yes, I used that as a rubric to try to educate or at least inform people that I worked with on why is this virtuous, that what we're doing and what system are we seeking to protect. And although it's not a perfect system, it's better than most or all systems that have ever existed. And it allows for individual freedom, religious freedom, business freedom, and why those are good things that should be preserved. I definitely, proselytized more about that later in my career than I did in the beginning. But yeah.
That's cool. I watched a video, I think it was just an intro to you on YouTube, and it was like a 3-minute video. It had Levi Morgan and a few others talking about what you're doing at Spartan Forge, but talking to you as a person as well. It talked about your problem solving abilities and skills. And that's kind of what you're doing with your business. You're taking something, you're creating solutions to maybe problems that you've seen. Was that always your personality, or did the military help you become a problem solver to things? Or it seemed like that was kind of a skill set that everyone recommended, that Bill is a problem solver.
Yeah, it was definitely something the military has a lot of doctrine on how problems like Occam's razor, like break this thing down to the simplest level of analysis. account for the variables involved, and then evaluate courses of action based on the variables, and then rack and stack them, and have like always have a backup to your backup to your backup. And so as a young man, like before I joined the military, I had a lot of energy. You know, I was diagnosed with like ADHD, and they thought maybe I had Asperger's when I was a kid. Maybe I do still, I don't know. But I didn't listen in school. I was a mediocre student, C's and D's. And what the military did was it wore me out every morning. Like we'd wake up, go to PT formation at 6:00. You'd run 3 miles, or you'd do some kind of push-ups, pull-ups, 3-mile run, or you'd do a ruck march or jiu-jitsu, and it would wear me out. So that when 9:00 came and it was time to learn, it was no problem for me to sit down and listen because I was worn out. Whereas when I was going to school, I couldn't sit still on the desk. I couldn't listen. I was always trying to talk. I was but I was always hyper interested in ideas and people, more things than people, but I was always hyper interested in that. And the things that are interesting about it is when I was a kid, like, I don't know how old you are, but like they had
just
like
a year older than you.
Okay. So, you remember like the Scholastic pamphlets they'd send you home with, and there'd be books in there and stuff. On the back page though, there'd always be like, you know, maybe like a toy or a learning toy or something like that. I had ordered like a crystal radio, like just a coil radio, and that interested me. Like I focused on that, and I was like, how am I getting these signals from the air? There's no battery in here. Like, what am I doing? How does this work? So I had that interest, and what the school system didn't do for me was it didn't exhaust me so that I could sit and listen, but then, and I'm not saying they owed that to me, I'm just saying it didn't happen. And then B, they didn't tell me like, hey, we're teaching you about mathematics and linear algebra, and that's going to be able to help you understand something like artificial intelligence or a radio frequency link budget in a way that you can optimize these systems if you understand that. That was abstract to me. There was no linkage for me. So had they done that, it probably would have recalibrated me early. But what the military did was, hey, if you learn these things now, and really what I went through was like engineering school, electrical engineering school, it will make you a more effective soldier, and you can help save your buddies. And that motivated me. And with that addictive personality that I have, I would just focus on learning as much as I could. And then the military does a really great job on helping people problem solve. And there's, you know, what we call MDMP, or the military decision-making process. And ultimately, like what I took from that is like any situation that you find yourself in, just try to reduce entropy, try to reduce chaos, and identify what the exact problem is. Like instead of like 3 levels up, like here's a problem, is okay, that's one problem, but what's the core issue here? And then how do we correct that? And what is the decision-making process that goes into that? And how do I illustrate the risk of these courses of action for a commander, as a warrant officer, as a non-commissioned officer, to implement that? And that was important to me because it was built on the backs of people who had served long before me, who said this is the best way to do it. And it came down to how do I do a variable analysis? How do I identify entropy? How do I account for it? How do I reduce it? And then how do I make that palatable to a military commander that may not care about any of it? You know? So that breakdown, that process, I was definitely taught while I was in the military.
That's cool.
But because I was in military intelligence, it appealed to the technical nature of what interests me is, which, you know, how things work.
Yeah.
So it was a really, you know, for me, I would say I was lucky. It was certainly God's plan for me, but it was also the right place with the right time and the right attitude.
Yeah.
I think is the biggest factor for all of it. Just like, here I am, send me, I'm ready to go. This is what I'm going to do. And you're going to get all of me while I'm doing this. That goes much farther. And it does for me hiring people today. Like I'll get a resume of someone who went to Harvard or went here, went there, and has all of these academic bona fides, which are great. Don't get me wrong. Like those things are great. But then is the person genuinely motivated? Do they care about the problem? Are they interested in discussion? And like, an exchange of ideas that might make their ideas fall apart, but will allow them to update their system in a meaningful way where they can become a better soldier, husband, father, whatever it is. And when I meet those people, they may not have any of the technical stuff.
Right.
But when I meet those guys where I can or gals where I can recognize that counterpoint in them, that they just want to learn and they want to do cool things.
Can you just recognize that because that was you? You have that that perspective and empathy.
I would say I have I've always said, and I believe it's true, is I'm not the best technician. I was never the best leader. I was never the best NCO. I was never the best in shape. I was never the most disciplined. But what I had a knack for was surrounding myself with people that I think had that natural drive and kind of bringing out the best of them as a leader, but basing it in something like first principles where they can, not only can they understand every action that I wanted to take as a leader or direction that I was pushing us, I always empower them to go out and do that without me. Like, you understand my intent. This is my intent, like very high level, 30,000 feet. These are the things I want to get done. Then they don't have to check in with me every time. And so I've reduced entropy. I've reduced the chaos. And now they can be an independent actor and take responsibility for what they're doing. And if they make a mistake, as long as they can articulate to me, hey, this was your number one thing you wanted to get done, and I saw this mistake that I made, although at the time, now I know it was a mistake, but at the time I thought this was a way to satisfy this thing you're doing, then we have an understanding and we can move forward. And it was only when I had to, the only problems I ever had with soldiers is where they willingly neglected that rubric that I had issued. Right. And then we're trying to do something either because they thought they were smarter than the unit or smarter than the commander or whatever. But that was very rare, like so rare. So yeah, I feel like I recognize it. Of course, sometimes I'm wrong. Yeah. I make, investments in people where they're able to fool me. But again, when you fight like what I would call God or what others might call the fabric of reality, it's like a bow. You can only bend that bow so far before it snaps back. No matter how conniving you are, no matter how good of a liar you are, no matter how deceitful you are, it will come back in spades. Yeah. And the longer you try to bend the fabric of reality, the worse the bust back is. And that's probably my most, it's something I try to tell my son all the time, my daughters all the time, is like, look, it's moral to be a truth teller. It's moral to be a good person. It's virtuous to want the best for others. It doesn't only work at that level of analysis. It also works because it reduces entropy. And if you use the truth as a rubric to navigate yourself through the world will unfold before you, and people will see that you're a truth teller. And you've also, when you lie, which I've done and everyone's done, you create like a fractured section of reality where now you have to remember all of those lies and all of those things. And it sucks your soul away and it consumes you. And so if you can just understand that, yes, you should want to be truthful and virtuous and all of those things because it's the right way to be, but also because it will bring about a better life. Now, that might mean in the very beginning you need to atone for things that you've done, but just get out of the way and move on. Yeah. And then like the world just becomes such a better place for you when you can put that together and do that. And I still have many relationships with many guys that I served with, because that's my rubric's been simple ever since. It's like, tell the truth, reduce entropy, and genuinely try to bring out the best in other people. Yeah. It's simple. It's not easy. It's simple. You know what I'm saying?
That's awesome. But it creates the end result in many regards is trust, and trust is so important to moving forward in whether it's the military or your company or your family. That this is called the Conquer Cast. I want to equip our listeners with ways to conquer in life. I mean, tell the truth, create systems. I love even your your example of the military exhausts you first, and then you're able to listen or pay attention. It might alert your brain. I was the same kind of student growing up, the C's and D's, and man, if the education system used like physical fitness as the first thing we do and maybe exhaust us, wear us down, but then that always has an ability to awaken our mind. Yeah. That would have been huge for me. I see that's the routine I'm in now with my life as an adult. I wake up and I do physical things first, and then I'm able to more fully, contribute to life and in my business and such. But that would have been great as a child. I love all these systems, and I love that just the truth telling, because maybe it's hard at first, but it's so much easier in the long run. You know, you don't have to go back and try to remember how to cover up or whatnot. And so just being honest. But the result, in my opinion, one of our core values that's up on the wall right there is trust. And that's what Mountain Ops is really focused on. It's building connections and relationships of trust, which you follow through with the things you say you're going to do.
Yep.
How have those systems and processes been? It sounds like it's been, helpful in your family, obviously in the military. Now when did you launch Spartan Forge? How long have you been doing that?
I mean, I first started the idea in 2017, and the product was first offered in 2021 in a very nascent form. And we're really what I would call our third year.
Okay. Yeah. Similar processes that you took from the military and everything that you've applied to this. And I love that. Spartan Forge, powerful name. Yeah. Where did that come from?
So in the military, we had these things called staff rides, or office hours with like the commanding general. When you're an officer, they'll take you somewhere impactful. Like when I lived in Hawaii, they'd taken us to the radar site, where it was the radar site that saw the Japanese planes coming, but they didn't trust the technology. And Pearl Harbor happened as a result. Had they trusted the technology, they would have deployed aircraft to intercept them, but they didn't. And so one of the staff rides that I went on was we were stationed in Germany, and we went to Thermopylae, which is where the Spartans fought the Persians. In the movie 300, it was stylized and made into like this big thing. But what struck me about them from a military perspective, a military decision-making process, was they knew their constraints, and they optimized. They chose the battlefield and the area to counteract what their weaknesses were, which at that point there were 300 Spartans and like 10,000 Greeks with them. Very small fighting force versus what was probably a 300 to 700,000 person fighting force in the Persians. The first time under Darius, and then the second time under Xerxes, which is what you see in the movie. Yeah. And they chose these hot gates because it was water on one side with a wall and stone on the other. And it only allowed for a few hundred people to fight at a time. And what that did was it took the strength of the enemy, which was overwhelming numbers, and it forced them into, their hubris took hold and thought, well, 700,000 guys, easy day. And they ended up, fighting them off for many days. That was probably one of the sparks of like Western knowledge and, propagating throughout the world. Of course, there are many, like the Enlightenment. Although I think the Enlightenment gets more bona fides than it deserves, but that's a separate podcast. But there are these things that contribute to the undergirding idea is people should self-govern. Dictators and kings, that's kind of becoming a thing of the past, and logic and Western thought and those things are worth preserving and worth dying for. So, when I was thinking of the name of Spartan Forge, it was like, these are the tools for a Spartan persona, a Spartan person, a person who wants to optimize and choose the terrain and choose the battlefield and their weapon of choice, and do that variable analysis and understand everything involved, the weather, the terrain, the learning curve, all of that stuff, and give a all-encompassing product that would allow them to apply as much pressure in the outdoors while prepping as much as they could at a computer or a phone. So Spartan Forge,
it's amazing.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's a great name, and I was surprised it wasn't taken when I thought of it, and it wasn't. So here we are.
So 2020, you've been working on 2017, 2021, kind of official out to the consumer.
The app, the mobile app.
Is that's the focus now? Is the app and
the mobile app and the desktop client are the two focuses right now primarily.
And what's the mission? What are you out to? What's the problem now that you've solved?
So we're still solving it, but the major problem I would say is that there's a lot of factors. People are running out of time in that, people are working 2 jobs. Women work more now than ever, which isn't a bad thing or a good thing. I'm just saying, like, families now, it's not like mom's at home taking care of kids. There's daycare, there's sports, there's limited time. Like, I remember my mom would drop me at sports when I was a kid. she'd just drop me off and I'd go do practice or whatever, and then walk home afterwards or whatever. Parents got to be at practices now. Parents got to be at all of these things now. It's bad and it's good, but regardless, people have less time. Yeah. So the focus was how many, again, under that rubric of variable analysis, how many variables can I account for in the hunting endeavor, and then bring that information to bear in a seamless platform that beyond just mapping in pins and weather, like we have a large language model that people can ask about, like, hey, I've been a whitetail hunter. I drew my first Montana general elk tag. How should I tune my arrow? Like, we have a large language model that helps them with that. Or, I want to have 34 pounds in my backpack. That's what I've been training with. And, what mountain ops, telling you about Drew and I packing last year, like how much of these things weigh if I want to do it for this many days, and it will help you with your pack out in your bag. That's cool. And then understanding the wind and understanding the LiDAR layer and taking the foliage off and looking at the ground below, or what logging trails are left that an elk or a mule deer might be using. What is the weather historically in November? What was the weather on this day that I saw this animal on a trail camera? You can look that stuff up inside of the app. You can use a thing called Blue Force Tracker where you're auto dropping pins inside of like some geometry. So if you and I are hunting together, we build the geometry, and then we're auto sharing pins, photos. We can share location, that type of thing. And it all auto updates. And then 5 to 15 centimeter imagery, so I can identify what trees are on the ground. Where's the transition from a vegetative perspective? Where do these pines turn into coniferous trees or whatever? And then historical imagery on top of that. So it was just like that fact, all of that analysis, and trying to put it under the hood of one thing. So it would be, in the past when I was whitetail hunting, which that's kind of was my passion, is bow hunting whitetails, I'd be using 7 or 8 different apps. What's the historical wind in this area? What was the fawn recruitment rate like in these places 2 years ago? The same way that I plan military operations, I was planning hunting. Cool. Like, how many things can I figure out to inform my scouting when I get into the field? And so just bringing all of those things together and putting it in a easy to use, American built product that's half the price of our competition, that is there to genuinely serve the outdoorsman. And as much technology is there, if you want to just drop pins, you can still do that. If you just want to walk to pins, you can do that. If you want to look at how the sun rises and sets and how it heats the terrain, you can do that. If you want to get really nerdy and look into fawn recruitment rate or doe estrus dates, or you can get really into the weeds on it. You can do that as well. So it's amazing. Maintaining that tension to keep a product that informs but doesn't over-inform or create paralysis by analysis.
That's really cool. Congrats, man.
Thank you.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
So it sounded like it started kind of East Coast or whitetail oriented, and now making your way into the West Coast.
Last year we partnered with Eastman's, and we did this tag hub where you can look at like Western draw odds, that type of stuff. We did the LiDAR layer out here. The sun, I call it solar flux, and I think we call it sun exposure in the app.
And tell us what LiDAR layer and everything for those that
so LiDAR is just a radar is radio detection and ranging, and that's using pulses of energy to measure speed and velocity and bearing of an item. With LiDAR, it's the same thing. It's just a light sensor on an airplane, and it penetrates foliages and buildings so that you can see what's below. So if there was a logging operation or a mining operation where there are roads and stuff left behind, when those woods start to grow back, animals reclaim those roads because they're easier places to travel. So you get a picture of the ground and the rocks and the formations and their slope angle and stuff you can throw over top of it, again, to inform your scouting.
Are you having to fly those planes on a somewhat regular basis for updates? Or what do you...
We partner with a couple of organizations, and then we also get it from like logging companies and mineral companies, and then we get it from the federal government has some for some places, although it's not as high resolution as we like. But we've got like 80% of the U.S. covered in high resolution, and we're updating that this year. And with the 5 centimeter imagery, we were covering like 40% of the U.S. And in 2 weeks, it'll be like 70%, 65% of the U.S. And we have an initiative to get Montana blanketed by the end of the year. Don't know if we'll get there, but we'll get close. And so it's partnering. And then what I've always done with Spartan Forge is, whether it was reaching out to academics about GPS collared deer data or elk data, or partnering with mining operations or forestry operations. It was, hey, I'll give you free apps and the data, and you can visualize it and have it really easy in here. Just give me access to the raw data so I can use it for my own purposes. So there's a give and take. And I think because we're a small business and I'm the guy who makes the decisions, it reduces entropy, and we're able to really move fast. And myself being the product owner, I talked to you about that earlier. That's probably my favorite function in the company is, things stay cohesive and we can keep pushing meaningful features for people that they'll use instead of just some data that we come across. And we're like, oh, we'll throw in the northwestern turkey feather count data. It's like, no, it's not necessary. Let's just, that's a layer of data. Someone made it for some reason. That's great. Let's focus on fire burn history. Let's focus on solar flux. Let's focus on 5 to 15 centimeter LiDAR data.
So did most of this come from your own hunting experience, and you're out there kind of problem solving those situations and saying this would be applicable, we should add it, or do you have a team? Does your team kind of come back with that as well from the field? Most of the
first features for the first couple of years were all mine. Okay. Now I've got a team and researchers and other people that help me, and they're definitely better than I am. But it was first informed by my military service. So battlefield commanders want to understand the operational environment. They want to understand the terrain, the constraints of the terrain, the logistical flows of the area, the culture of the people, and all of those things. So it was really like transfer state, like taking that type of analysis that I did in the military and now implanting it into Spartan Forge. That informed a lot of the beginning of it. But now I've got research, like we brought on researchers who did a lot of Western hunting. Yeah. I have not done as much Western hunting. Okay. But now we've got guys who are like, hey, we need X, Y, and Z for elk or whatever. Like, point these things out, or here's how we want to do the LiDAR layer, so it helps people figure out, elk want to bed on a grade that's 15% less or less in angle. So, we can start highlighting that on the mountainside and doing that type of stuff. So as we gather more steam and head into the future, it's much more of a community effort than it was in the very beginning when there was just 3 of us.
Huh. What's been the most challenging aspect of like building this successful business from maybe getting it out there and then even just building the actual product? What
I would say the most, so I have my mind does not work in the way that most people's minds work. And it's a bug and a feature for me. Like it helps me in some places, it hurts me in others. So when we didn't take into account, people get programmed when they use another app or they use a service or whatever it is. You figure out a heuristic or a way that you want to do things, a good enough sequence of events that leads to a positive outcome, or you use an app for long enough and you're trained on it. I didn't account for how people have been getting trained on these other apps to do things. And what I wanted, my rubric was, let me make this as simple as possible. And one of the things I really focus on was I want people to have to touch the app and the screen as little as possible. So if I can, like, instead of going through 5,000 layers and scrolling up and down and looking for the one that I want and doing all that stuff, it's like, I just want a chip that says public land. When you hit it, you're getting all the public land. People were calibrated for other apps or other ecosystems and things. And if I had been smarter in the beginning, I would have maybe adopted some of these things, these ways that they had learned. And then maybe started introducing the ways that I would do it, which I think are a lot more efficient, or by virtue of it requires less interaction with the app. Therefore, it's more efficient. In other words, I can metabolize this for people or help people metabolize this. In other apps, you might, hit a gear and then there's 1,000 layers and you go by state. And in every state, there's 500 layers and blah, 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 blah. And then if you want to look at a topo map and you want to see public land, you're looking at like 10 or 15 clicks.
Layering and layering.
And just layer. And then if you want to just go back to an aerial map, now you have to go back in there and get rid of all that stuff. So the 2 things I did in the app were I used a chip system where you just push that map layers button, you just hit the chip of what you want to see, and it's displaying it for all of the US. And then I did this thing with preset maps where you click your map layers button, there's presets like car radio. Like, instead of tuning your radio 98.6, you just hit the number 3 and now you're on 98.6. So I use that preset system so you could preset an aerial layer, you could preset a topo layer, you could preset a LiDAR layer. And all you gotta do is flip through the compass. So I put that in there and I put like a little, in the beginning, I put a little thought bubble that says, hey, if you want to quickly preset your map so you don't have to keep reconfiguring stuff, preset them and then just swipe this compass. And people would be using the app for like 2 years, and then they'd see me on a podcast and they'd be like, I didn't know I could do that. Or like on our compass, if you just double click it, it drops a pin. So someone will see that and be like, I didn't know that.
Because they were just trying to use the app the way they'd use other.
They'd use other apps. So I created friction. I created chaos by not accounting for people's programming, which they can't help. And I don't mean that in a bad way.
Oh, makes sense.
It's just the way that they had learned to do things. I could have reduced friction by adopting some of those ways. And then once they were in the ecosystem, then learn them, then educate them on how to do things simpler.
Interesting.
That was a growing pain for me.
Yeah.
That took me a couple of years to get down to.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's cool. It sounds like a very user friendly. I can't wait to dive into it. I'm gonna start using it. I've got a hunt coming up, and I've got a bunch this fall. I know a lot of the team is excited that you're here today because they're excited to use it. But the hunting industry, and is this, since 2017, is this a new industry coming out of the military, like diving into it? You mentioned your father passed away when you were young. Who got you into hunting? Where did that become because typically the story is my father got me in,
Yeah. So in North Dakota, everyone kind of culturally hunts, but it's based around rifle season.
Okay.
It's like everyone pretty much hunts November 6th until November 16th. And it's rifle season. The Orange Army hits the woods and everyone's hunting whitetail. Now we've got a lot more elk and mule deer and pronghorn and moose than we've had in the past. So now there's starting to be a lot more, people exploring these other species. But growing up, it was just whitetail in North Dakota. And so there'd be a cultural rifle season where it would be an uncle of mine or a family friend or this kid I grew up with whose dad was a hunter. I played football with him. You would just go out and you'd sit in an ice shed that would be for lake fishing on the corner of a field. You'd wait for the deer to walk out to the pile of corn in the middle of the field. You'd pop them. You'd have your venison and go home. That was kind of how hunting started for me. But then I was home on a tour from Iraq. I was probably 25 or 26 or something. And I had a brother-in-law who was a bow hunter. And he was like, you got to try it. Like, this is awesome. And the first time I loosed an arrow, I was addicted.
Yeah.
And
was it on a hunt or at a target?
Yeah, it was on a hunt. Okay. I had obviously shot on a target first, but it didn't grab me. There's a strange thing in the military where, or not strange, but it's esoteric in that few people experience it. In that when you're planning for an operation, you're putting everything together, there's blood and there's treasure on the line, there are your friends on the line. You want to be as diligent as you can in accounting for every variable and making sure that the decision makers that have to commit life and blood to something have every bit of information that they need. And then when that operation unfolds and it's successful and everything has happened and everyone comes home, there's a buzz that is hard to describe. Hunters will understand it because it's the same buzz that you get when you fly out to Utah or New Mexico for a first elk hunt. And all of this information that you're putting together, and it might be your third season of being without an elk, and you're putting it all together and you're figuring things out and you're trying to learn. And then that moment of truth happens and that screaming dinosaur walks out at 25 yards. There's a buzz that takes place after 100%. That where it's a heightened sense of things and you're aware of everything, but you're focused on one thing. And it's really difficult to put yourself in that position because it's like you're interacting with nature and reality and God and this way of living or this hunter mindset that's obviously been with us as a species for a very long time. So, the people that got that buzz and wanted it again were out providing food for the tribe, or even today in Africa, people still go on a hunt for food, or my kids mostly eat wild game sustenance. It taps into a very deep part of yourself. And when I was leaving the military, I was like, what am I going to be able to do? Crunching numbers or being an engineer or working in a government contractor. It's not going to do this for me. And I don't know what I'm going to do. And then when I got the idea for Spartan Forge, it was like, okay, now I've got something where not only can I build something that people are going to use, but every story where someone uses my app and a father and a son kill a deer for the first time, or they, get a elk for the first time, or it helps them put something together. I'm playing a 2 to 3% part in something that is actually wholesome. It's actually good. It's good for everyone involved. And they're not the product.
Yeah.
Like when you're looking at Instagram or Facebook or whatever, you're the product. Like they need you on there to see the advertisements, to make the revenue. They need your interactions. They need your time. And that's why it's free, because you're the product. I didn't want to make a product where my consumer was the product. I wanted to make a product where my consumer was the beneficiary of the work, and that I could play a small part in that role of making a memory that they're going to have forever. Like, it's morbid to think about, but some kid might be, or not kid, adult might be interacting with his father on his deathbed or burying his father and thinking about that one time we hunted deer together. Yeah. And, we put this stuff together, and even though they might not bring up Spartan Forge in the story, and I don't care if they do, but it helped them create something that they'll have for a lifetime. That is a very high, it's on the hierarchy of needs of the company of Spartan Forge. That's very high up there, is partaking in that and not being a parasite on that, but being a force multiplier for that. So,
that's powerful, because when you break it down, those moments are the moments that matter most in life, where there's that connection, and those are the things that people do remember on the deathbed, and they're bringing back those memories. And whether they recognize that Mountain Ops was flowing through their blood, or they were utilizing Spartan Forge, it was part of this accumulation of everything. And I've felt what you shared about that buzz hunting. I've never been a part of the military. It's interesting to know that that's kind of the similar.
It's the same thing. It lasts a little longer in my experience in the military. You'll get an adrenaline dump like 7 or 8 hours later. For 7 or 8 hours, you're on a high afterwards. You're just like, yes. Like everything went well. Now there's a corresponding, when things don't go well, you're in the deepest parts of your human psyche. But for me, the high parts of it, it's like, you might have an operation at 2 or 3 in the morning, and you don't sleep that night. At 9 or 10, you're still talking about it. And then there's an adrenaline dump. Whereas in hunting, it's like an hour or so where you're hyped up and you're shaking afterwards and all of that stuff. So it's a little quicker, but it's no less meaningful. Yeah. And I don't say that as in like the military operations are on the same plane as a hunt. But your physiology doesn't know that.
Right.
Your physiology knows, we're basically like combat, food and sustenance, family. Yeah. Those are the 3 things. So that keep a civilization around. So you're engaging on one of them. Yeah. And you're doing it. And it speaks to a very deep part of me. And I think to a very deep part of a lot of people that partake in this culture.
Well, I love how deep you are and how you're thinking about it, how you've built it with that depth in mind. You've mentioned God multiple times. How has he been a part of your life from the very beginning? Obviously that relationship grows and the connection it matures over time. But how has God and your faith played a role in even in your childhood, in your military, and now even in your business and where you're going with it?
Well, there's an inextricable link there. I'll say I was more of a event. So what happened was I moved. My younger brother went to rehab. He was 14 and he had to go to rehab in like a children's what would you call it? Like a jail, but it was not jail, but it was like juvenile hall. Yeah. But it wasn't juvenile hall. Okay. It was like a restorative thing. And my older brother was addicted to methamphetamines. Then I had a sister that had left, and she just died a few years ago, very young. I'm sorry. And then another sister of mine just recently I buried. But what happened was I had one sister, and she married into a family that was a Christian family. Up to that point, being part of a small town, church was just a place you went on Sundays. Yeah. And it wasn't really something, even as a kid, you don't really think about these things deeply. You kind of have that, and I'm not cutting it down, but you kind of have that, there's a man in the sky watching me, and I ought to get in line. And that's a good level of analysis for children to operate under. That's not bad, starting point. But it's a starting point. That's exactly what it is. And when I moved up there, I got more, it was a community that was very Christian focused. And I would say that was the most evangelical part of my life, where I was like singing in church and youth group and like all of the goodness that comes with that. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of goodness there. Yeah. I'm just saying I've kind of transcended that. Yeah. I still go to church every Sunday, but my connection with God and my connection, like, we could do 3 hours on this, and I'm trying to do this in 30 minutes.
You're good.
But God makes up for me the fabric of reality, and he's not only God the Father, he's reality itself, and he's the thing that sets everything in order, and he's the thing that we interact with on the end of our bed when we're having a problem. He's the thing that honors the sacrifices that we make when we want things now and we say, I'm going to put this off. Like, I don't want to do the cold plunge this morning. I don't want to do the workout. I don't want to save the money. I want to go on a vacation. I don't want to do this. God is also that thing that interacts with you and honors the sacrifices that you make. And when you think about it, there's no reason why reality should set itself out for you like that. You could have a very hedonistic lifestyle, and some people do, and you can put it off for a while. But, my relationship with God and how that's grown over the years is he's not this man in the sky. He's actually everything. He sets the world in order. And if we follow his edicts and appreciate what he's done for us, and we sacrifice to him, and we listen to the Holy Spirit when we engage with it in a meaningful congress, like in a meaningful discussion, how am I falling short? How am I not doing right? What am I doing wrong? Strangest thing about it all is you will get an answer. Yeah. And people can say, oh, it's biochemical, or it's this or it's that. And it's like, no, because if I were just a biomechanical meat machine, I wouldn't have to ask the answer and wait for it. Yeah. I would have it. It would be there. It's part of the system. But what happens is you get the answer, and oftentimes it's the right answer. And and your consciousness is telling you shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be doing that. You ignore it at your peril. But when you start listening to it, I think it was Socrates who said, someone had asked him, like, why are you the greatest man in Greece, or something along those lines. And he said, I do everything my inner self tells me to do. In other words, God the Father, he didn't call it that at that time, but the Holy Spirit was there, interacted with him and set a path out for him. And in some way, people always say, like, I lived in this place and I don't know, some place far off where there wasn't a church, or there wasn't like a way to be saved or redeemed through God. And it's like, well, it's there. There are people around trying to do that for you, but also he's at your bedside. Yeah. And you can actually barter with him. And I'm not saying barter like trade for something better or screw him over or something, but you can sacrifice to him and listen to him, and the world will unfold for you in a meaningful way, even if it doesn't end in victory. I said it to a guy on a podcast the other day. I said, I don't want to do anything that I wouldn't want to have to explain to my daughter or read about in the newspaper. And my consciousness tells me when I'm about to do something that might, and I violently go in the other direction. I'm a very disagreeable person. And so it helps me in that regard, because if I follow that rubric and I listen to the Holy Spirit, things work better for me. So if someone, and I deal with a lot of guys, especially in the military and in other places in technology and engineering, where they're materialists and they're just thinking about the material world. And I always say to them, just run the experiment, man. Just listen to yourself, listen to your consciousness. What is right? What is wrong? Don't think about your needs. Don't think about what will put more money in your bank account. Don't think about what will get you the nicer truck. Engage in a thoughtful internal dialogue with, you can call it transcendent nature. You can call it transcendent reality. I call it God, and I do believe in Christ. And you will get your answers, and the world and the people around you and yourself will be a better place as a result of it. And it always works. And then to the people who would say, well, it didn't work out so well for the apostles. And it's like, well, we're talking about the apostles today. Who else are we talking about from 2,000 years ago? There's a lot to be said with Spartan Forge even. Like, I'm using that rubric to build Spartan Forge. And say Spartan Forge goes under, and it's been close for us a couple times. Say it doesn't work. I get to look my daughter in the eye and say, I followed my heart. I followed God. I spoke the truth, and I did what I could to be right and truthful to everyone. In the final analysis, it didn't work out, but I'm a better man for it. And that's the highest.
That's success right there.
To me, that is success. Yeah. And I've also said the other thing, and I continue to say it, because I don't wish for death, but I would be happy if it meant me tomorrow. Like I'd be like, I have lived with a full heart and tried to make myself the best version of myself that I can be. And I didn't think I'd get there by 42, but I am there. I'm trying to be, I'm messing up all the time. I sometimes catch myself on a lie. I try to quickly correct it. I make mistakes. Obviously I'm mired in what you would call sin, but I'm always orienting myself towards being a better person and making everyone around me better. And people recognize that counterpoint in me and do the same thing. And that is, I think, as good as we can try to do. So like, awesome. I don't know if we could do better. I don't know what's better than that. You can't describe to me something better than that. Yeah. You know, if people are telling my story or talking about me later and they say, yeah, he screwed up a couple businesses and people lost their jobs, but he tried to build something and do the right thing no matter what. And I always think about it like I think about a really good movie or book that's not appreciated in its time. Yeah. It's like, you know, I'm trying to think of a movie. Judge Dredd is a movie that came out in 2012. Okay. $30 million budget. I think it made like $5 million at the box office. But now it's got a huge cult following. And now people love that movie. It wasn't appreciated in its time. Or I can make it more palatable. Nietzsche wrote in the 1870s. He sold like 30 books while he was alive. And we're talking about him today. Yeah. And what I mean by that is if you do the right thing and you provide people useful information, even if you're not appreciated in your time, people will look back and appreciate what you were. And that's the meta goal. Yeah. Like that's bigger than the bank account, the truck, the kids, thinking that you're the superstar or whatever. Generally people who pursue those things as a final objective, everything, it doesn't work out well for anybody who goes that way. I've never seen it work out for someone. They're empty, they're shallow, they're self-obsessed. They end up being in debt. They end up being hated by their own kids, which to me is a fate worse than death. Right. So I won't sacrifice those things. And so far, you know, I think about everything in terms of engineering and programs. And I've been running this code for the past 12 years, and it's worked out fantastic. That's awesome. It is the key.
But I think of what this podcast is all about, and you're laying down like the groundwork for conquering in life. Honestly, it's like, and you know, for those naysayers or those that say, oh, what about the apostles or what about these people that doing these things doesn't mean that everything's always going to go the way that we imagine it. Right. But or it might not be. It might be a painful process, but there's so much purpose in pain. There's so much that comes from it. There's so much perspective gain. There's so much empathy gain. And so, like you're saying to the audience listening, I try. Sometimes in the scriptures, God says, "Try me in this."
Yeah, just do it.
That's kind of what you're saying is, hey, just test it.
Yeah, see if it works out.
See if it works out.
Especially when I deal, like I said, with engineers or material rationalists or people who are steeped in science. Well, first I would say the scientific method existed in its purest form because of Christians. Yeah. People who are pursuing absolute truth no matter the cost, like Galileo. You know, it's almost backwards in that we oftentimes, because we're children, we get to the evangelical side of Christianity in any of its stripes, right? Where we're doing we're preaching, we're wearing it on our sleeve, we're singing out loud, which there's value in that, but there's more value in like walking soft and carrying a big stick. And it's like, what makes this guy tick? Like all of the successful people that I know, it's like that rubric is at their core. And they rarely talk about it unless you press them on it, but they're living it. And that to me is a far more powerful proclamation of the substance of the universe and the arbiter of it, God in this case, that if you just live it, like you'll run into a million people who are like, I'm a big Christian, blah, 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 blah. And then they're doing awful stuff on the weekends, or they don't treat their kids well or whatever. And you're like, this guy's a Christian? Like, and then also there's no worse representation in the public eye than someone who proclaims themselves to be something that they're not, and then lives out a fully separate life and does all of these things. And I'm not judging those people, but what I am saying is when you encounter people that do walk softly and carry a big stick, and they are trying to make people better around them, and they are reliable and they are trustworthy, and they do these things, when you peel it away, that's usually because Christ or God is at the core, and that they believe in that the fabric of reality will judge you if you don't comport yourself in a way that is loving others more than yourself and putting yourself in front of other people, or putting yourself between people and negative outcomes or negative consequences. And that if you can do that and do it in a way that's genuine, you're running the code. And that's what I say to people is just run the code. And the reason why I say it was kind of inverted is you can get to the evangelical part later where you're, openly screaming to the hilltops, professing your faith. I think it works a lot better when people see how you comport yourself in the world, and then they become genuinely interested. And then you peel it away and you say, well, I mean, the bottom line is everything that I've said to you in the last 20 minutes is how I try to comport myself. And I don't do it perfectly by any means and I'm not saying that, like, I make mistakes all the time.
We're supposed to strive, and that means, you will make mistakes, but you test, you learn, apply. I think that's the whole purpose for having Jesus Christ as the Savior, is that we will make mistakes, and then we have Him to count on, and we can turn to Him and we can improve. Otherwise, we wouldn't need Him.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And He's the one who, and I also tell people, like, just just read, if you've not read the Bible before, just read it and look at it as a historical document, or look at it as a rule book, and just treat it like that, especially the New Testament, because the New Testament, like maybe the part about we're going to wipe out this, this, God had His reasons, and I'm not the creator, and I don't know why that had to happen in that way, but trust me, it had to. And that's the Old Testament, and that was something more other people lived under. And it was probably because it was a very rougher version of the world, where if you weren't going to do that, you were going to be the one who gets wiped out. Or you had to wear different cloths, or you couldn't eat pork, or you couldn't do these things because you were trying to set yourself apart. That was the rubric for people before Christ. But post-Christ, it's turn the other cheek. It's pray, it's listen, I'll provide you the answer. It's no matter how bad it gets, I've got your back. And run that system. Just in the world, strip all of the supernatural out of it. Read what Job went through. Look at the New Testament. Look at what God commands us to do in the Sermon on the Mount. Look at all of those things and run the code.
I love that you're calling it the code.
Yeah. Well, it is the code.
I wrote a book. I'm going to give it to you. Oh, okay. It's called The Conquer Code.
Oh, okay, great.
And it's what you're speaking to, maybe just in my own words, but you speak, you're very eloquent with the way that you share it. You're very intelligent, but yet you're humble. You're recognizing God. You're recognizing the source of your strength. And so I appreciate the humble nature that somebody with your type of intelligence can take, because oftentimes it's not found that way, where somebody with that type of intelligence, they kind of rely upon the arm of the flesh and their own knowledge and their wisdom and this and that. But you've defined success in a really good way. And I love, John Maxwell once stated that success is knowing that those who know you best love you most. And your children that you've talked about, if they know that no matter if the business fails or succeeds or whatnot, you treated people this way, you ran your business this way, you were honest this way, you were true to your core, and He who knows us best is God. And so success is knowing that He who knows us best loves us most.
But also knowing that it's a horrible path. And what I mean by that horrible path in life is that if you follow the commandments, if you keep good with God, the worst thing that humans do, and due to our sinful nature, is we will kill the ideal. And that's best represented through God and Christ. Like the perfect person, we threw him up on a cross and killed him at a very young age. And so I'm very good friends, like with the Seek One guys. Lee Ellis and I are very close friends. Drew married my wife and I years ago. Very close with those guys. And Lee, who's one of the most genuine, nice guys I've ever met in my life. And one of the best whitetail hunters I've ever met. Like, people would give him crap for like the urban stuff early on, but then he started going public land hunting in Oklahoma and 185-inch stud deer and like all of these places where his meticulous nature transferred to all of these different environments and allowed for success. And he would be like, oh man, I'm getting a lot of crap about this deer I killed because people think that I just paid for property. And we'll be talking and I'll be like, hey man, if you're doing what you're doing and you're listening to God and you're keeping Him at the center of this, people, when they encounter an ideal in any dominance hierarchy in any space, right? If they aren't willing to do what the person who's at the top of the king of the hill right now was willing to do to get up there, the easiest thing to do is to cut them down.
Yeah.
And dispatch with them and make fun of them and cut them down. And God, Jesus is the prima facie best example of that. 100%. If you're going to keep the law, if you're going to tell people to turn the other cheek, and you're going to say that to the Pharisees or whomever, who are the ones who said that they were the ones that had the God's ear and kept the law, which they didn't do, they will kill you.
Yeah.
And that's what they will do to you online, is they'll try to kill you. And it's not because they hate you, they don't know you. It's that they've encountered someone who's willing to do more than they are willing to do, and they don't want to metabolize that.
So interesting.
And so take it as a compliment. Keep doing what you're doing. You know you're not doing anything wrong. You know you've got God at the top of your hierarchy. You know that you try to be a good person in everything that you do, and it's leading you to success. And the best thing that you can do is, when you have those conversations with people or you meet them at a trade show or do whatever, is let them know how you do what you do, and then they get to make a decision of whether or not they're willing to do the same. And if they're not, what they can say is, that guy's at a level I don't have the time to get to, but I appreciate that there are people like him out there showing us that anyone who's willing to knock on a door, or anyone who's trying to ask for access, anyone who's trying to scout their tails off, I promise you he's looking at deer camera photos right now. Anyone who's willing to do that can attain that, but what it means is orienting yourself towards it and doing what is necessary. And that is a great outgrowth of the American experiment, because we allow for this craziness. There's no Lee Ellis in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
There's no Lee Ellis in Russia and Siberia. There's no Lee Ellis in South America. It's only this crazy experiment where he can make a life for himself by pursuing something, and he's letting people know that if they're just willing to get out of the truck and knock on a door and ask for access, or go to a bowyer and ask, how do I get my bow set up better, or how do I do this? If you're able to reduce your hubris and your ego and just subject yourself to the trials that will come with success, you can elevate yourself to the top of that hierarchy. But know that while you're up there, those who aren't willing to will cut you down, because that's how they sleep at night.
Wow.
So
you've got a lot of great wisdom, man.
I wouldn't go that far. I would say I've made a ton of mistakes,
and that's where,
and I try not to remake those mistakes.
That's good, and that's wisdom right there. I appreciate the perspective that you've gained over the years and through all these experiences. And but what I most appreciate and respect about you is that you bring it back to God, and you trust in Him, and you're willing to share that.
Yeah, I am. I try not to press it on people, but when anyone asks me, you're opening a fountain, and I'll talk about it ad nauseum.
Yeah.
But it's got to exist in people that want it.
Yeah.
And they have to, all of us have to recognize that we don't have all the answers, and that the answers are out there. We just have to look, knock.
Yeah, I agree. One last question as we wrap up. Obviously, everyone, please check Bill out. Please go to Spartan Forge, get on their platform, download the app, utilize it.
Yep.
Anything else you'd want to share about where they can find you or anything?
Yeah, I mean, we're Spartan Forge on Instagram and Facebook. I do all of the customer service still. It's a point for me as a product owner when someone messages the company, whether it's praise or the opposite of praise, that I'm interacting with them. And then I usually, if there's a problem that needs to be solved, then I'll put them off to our customer service team. But I like to interact there. If people have questions about the app, about what we're doing, where we're going, we do a lot of veteran hunts. We do a lot for the veteran community, first responders and stuff. They can ask online, and I'll answer those questions. And then we have a massive update coming out. Like in the past, we have this 5 to 15 centimeter imagery where you can basically see a baseball on the ground.
Wow.
That was covering 35, maybe 40% of the U.S. in the past. We're going to triple that coverage and triple the amount of historical imagery. And we are looking to blanket the West as well. It's maybe 20 to 40% in the West. Oh. It's like 70 to 90% or 100% in the East. That's our biggest update, and a lot of bug fixes and a lot of UI, UX changes as we've learned on how making it a better product. And that update will be out in about a week or two.
Okay.
We'll unfortunately, just because the price of what it took to do the imagery, we have to increase it maybe 15 or 20% the price, but we're still cheaper than any other of the apps out there.
One last question as we wrap up on this, and I really appreciate your time. You've kind of answered this question. We read a book as a team. We've read it a couple times. It's called How Will You Measure Your Life? It's by a Harvard professor, Clayton Christensen. I feel like you've given some of this answer, but I always ask it of our guests on here. When all is said and done, as a conqueror in life, how will you measure your life?
Yeah, I mean, I've said a lot of it, but it really will come down to not what public writ large will think about me, because you really can't, if you live your life trying to force how people writ large think about you, you'll go insane. Yeah. But like you had said, the people who are closest to me know me. They know what my beliefs are. They know that I tried to do the best that I could with what I was given, and that my children can abstract whatever they choose to do in life. They can abstract out these patterns that I've, whether I've learned it through, my relationship with God, or my relationships in the military, or in Spartan Forge now, or in the community, that they can abstract those things and reduce entropy in their own lives. And that people will know me by my fruits. Like, awesome. They'll know that, hey, this guy is a good friend with Bill, I can trust him. Or this is a kid of Bill's, I can trust that person. That what we're trying to do is for the genuine betterment of people and the community, the hunting community that we're in. And, people are, we work best when we have burden. We work best when we have meaning and something to strive towards. And that even though we're not going to achieve everything that we strive for, that we're better people having chosen a goal that was maybe too large for us. But all of the benefit and all of the goodness and all of the things that come along the way is actually the goal. Even it's just that the path that you chose put you on that tangent. Yeah. So, I mean, just to kind of, I guess to pull the string on that a little bit more, it's just, there are no shortcuts. Yeah. The life of a person who is oriented towards truth and meaning at the deepest levels, whether that's through a relationship with your wife, with God, with your friends and your family, that it's not going to be easy, but it will be meaningful. And that if you do those things, like, that's the gift. That's what life is about, and that's what it's prepping us for. And that the system is the reward. That's awesome. That's the goal. Just pick something and get after it, and use the truth and the people around you to move towards it, and try to make sure everyone's getting better as a result. And I try to tell my kids that all the time, and of course I'm dad and I'm dumb, but hopefully later they'll come back or see these podcasts or something and say, he was onto something. And it's just, really, it's not even about my legacy or what I leave behind. It's more about how I impacted the people around me in the world. And that, America is always known as like the shining city on the hill. Like, I want to be a shining citizen in the shining city. That's cool. And if I can do that, and even if it leads to my death, even if it leads, like, I don't care. Like, it's morbid. People think it's morbid, but I'll end on this. It's like, I don't want to die tomorrow. That's not what I want to do. Yeah. But I do want to find something that's going to push me to the limit. That's going to take all of me. One of the things, it's a strange thing being in the military, but being in the military, somebody who, how can I put this without sounding really morose or really morbid? I'll put it this way. If I don't end up in jail by the time I'm 60 or 65, it's either because we're living in a perfect society, or I wasn't working hard enough. Like, I want this to end in me having to defend myself, or we're living in an awesome society where, I always joke and say it's like 1980s America, right? Or 1950s America. Obviously there were problems back then, but families were small, communities were small, people got along. We didn't judge other people. We worried about ourselves. That was a great time. Like, I loved being a kid in the 80s and the 90s. Yeah. Like, it was just squirt gunfights and fun and staying out till the lights were off. In that society, you can strive and go towards the top. But today, if you're going to speak the truth no matter what, if you're going to proclaim your relationship with God no matter what, you're in for a rocky road. Yeah. These people will cut you down. You look at what Elon Musk was trying to do with Twitter, or what he was trying to do with the budget, or all of these things. he was oriented towards the truth and acting in a very Christ-like manner, at least as it relates to what he was trying to do for the American people in the future. There's a 60 Minutes interview where he put the biggest battery in Australia because they were having power outages and stuff. And the lady asked him, like, there's people who are going to bed tonight who won't eat or have a meal. They don't have the power. And he looked back at her and said, with like a tear in his eye and like trying to keep his composure, saying, I'll work harder. Wow. And I believe if you do that, unless the society can tolerate you, you will end up in jail. You will end up on a cross. You will end up being persecuted. It will hurt. But that's why I kind of joke about it and saying, if I'm not in jail at 65, it's because we've built a fantastic society. There's a very deep, dark part of me that I want to stand up for the truth. I want to, I'm a disagreeable person, like I said. Yeah. I know how, God knows how things work and has instructed me and burdened me with that purpose. And I look forward to going to bat for it.
Wow.
So
that's powerful, man. Thank you for standing up.
Thank you.
And thank you for your service. Thank you for being an example of a great father, husband, business owner that builds business with ethics and morals and most importantly with God at the center. I appreciate the time today.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome.
Thanks.